The aerial reconnaissance photograph captured on May 28, 1944, showed exactly what German intelligence analysts expected to see. Hundreds of tanks lined up in neat rows across the fields of southeastern England. Landing craft crowded the harbors. Fuel depots sprawled across acres of farmland. The concentration of forces pointed to one inevitable conclusion. The Allied invasion of Europe would strike at the Pas-de-Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel, just 21 miles from the French coast. What the German analysts didn't know, what they couldn't know from 20,000 feet, was that they were looking at an army that didn't exist. The tanks were inflatable rubber. The landing craft were painted canvas stretched over wooden frames. The fuel depots were elaborate stage sets. And commanding this phantom force was Lieutenant General George S. Patton, Jr., the one man the German High Command feared above all others. The greatest deception operation in military history was unfolding across the fields of Kent and Sussex, and the fate of Operation Overlord, the Allied invasion of Normandy, depended entirely on whether Hitler would believe the lie. To understand why the Allies created a ghost army, one must first understand the strategic nightmare facing Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight D. Eisenhower in the spring of 1944. The Wehrmacht had constructed the Atlantic Wall, a series of fortifications stretching from Norway to the Spanish border, consisting of more than 6 million mines, thousands of concrete bunkers, and artillery batteries positioned to turn any invasion beach into a killing ground. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, appointed to command Army Group B in January 1944, had strengthened these defenses with a ruthless efficiency born from his experience in North Africa. Rommel believed the invasion had to be defeated on the beaches within the first 24 hours, before the Allies could establish a foothold. He had positioned 58 divisions along the coast, with the strongest concentration at Pas-de-Calais, where geography seemed to dictate the invasion must come. The Allied planners faced a brutal calculus. Intelligence estimates suggested that if the Germans concentrated their full defensive power at the actual landing site, the invasion could fail catastrophically. The memory of the Dieppe raid of August 19, 1942, haunted every planning session. That operation, a probing attack on the French coast, had resulted in 68% casualties among the attacking force, with 3,367 men killed, wounded, or captured in just 9 hours. The Allies needed the Germans to keep their forces divided, to maintain uncertainty about where the blow would fall, and most critically, to hold their powerful panzer divisions in reserve, far from Normandy even after the invasion began. The solution emerged from the minds of a collection of British intelligence officers, stage magicians, artists, and con men working within the London Controlling Section, a top-secret organization responsible for strategic deception. Lieutenant Colonel John Bevan, a mild-mannered banker in civilian life, directed the operation from offices at No. 6 Stories Gate, just steps from Winston Churchill's underground war rooms. Bevan's deputy, Colonel Ronald Wingate, had studied the principles of military deception used by the British in North Africa, where dummy tanks and false supply lines had repeatedly fooled Rommel. But Operation Fortitude, as the deception plan was codenamed, would dwarf anything previously attempted. It would require creating not just fake equipment, but an entire fictional military formation convincing enough to fool the German intelligence apparatus. The plan consisted of 2 components. Operation Fortitude North would suggest a phantom invasion of Norway by the British Fourth Army, based in Scotland. This force existed only on paper and in carefully orchestrated radio traffic, but it would tie down 12 German divisions in Scandinavia. The primary deception, however, was Operation Fortitude South, which would create the first United States Army group, known by its acronym FUSAG, supposedly preparing to invade Pas-de-Calais several weeks after the Normandy landings. And to command this fictional force, the Allies would appoint the one American general whose reputation guaranteed German attention, George S. Patton. The choice of Patton was deliberate and psychologically sophisticated. German intelligence had tracked Patton's movements obsessively since his arrival in North Africa in March 1943. His aggressive tactics in Sicily, where the 7th Army under his command had captured Palermo and beaten Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery to Messina, had earned grudging respect from German military analysts. More importantly, documents captured from German intelligence headquarters after the war revealed that Hitler himself considered Patton the most dangerous Allied general, more threatening than Eisenhower or Montgomery. Abwehr, the German military intelligence service, maintained a thick file on Patton, documenting his movements, his temperament, and his tactical preferences. The Germans believed, quite reasonably, that Eisenhower would give the most important invasion command to his best general. Therefore, wherever Patton was, the main attack would follow. The irony that Patton was available for this assignment stemmed from his greatest weakness, his inability to control his temper. On August 3rd and August 10th, 1943, at two separate field hospitals in Sicily, Patton had slapped two soldiers suffering from battle fatigue, calling them cowards and threatening to shoot them. When the incidents became public, the resulting scandal nearly ended his career. Eisenhower, facing intense pressure to relieve Patton of command, instead chose a punishment that would prove strategically invaluable. He removed Patton from the active invasion planning for Overlord and effectively put him on ice. This gave British intelligence the perfect opportunity. In January 1944, Patton was quietly informed that he would command FUSAG, an army group preparing for operations after the initial invasion. What he wasn't told, at least not initially, was that FUSAG existed solely as a deception. The construction of the Ghost Army began in earnest in February 1944. The responsibility fell to two specialized units. The 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, an American unit of just over 1,000 men, consisted of artists, sound technicians, and radio operators recruited from art schools and advertising agencies. Their commanding officer, Colonel Harry L. Reeder, had overseen similar deception operations in North Africa. Supporting them was a British unit that included stage designers from London's West End theatres and sculptors from the Royal Academy of Arts. Their workshop facilities, hidden in warehouses across southern England, became factories for producing military fakery on an industrial scale. The inflatable tanks, the most visible element of the deception, were manufactured by British rubber companies and American balloon manufacturers. Each dummy Sherman tank required 90 pounds of rubber and could be inflated in 15 minutes using compressed air pumps. From an altitude above 5,000 feet, aerial reconnaissance cameras could not distinguish them from genuine 30-ton M4 Sherman tanks. The deception units positioned these rubber decoys in carefully designed tank parks, paying meticulous attention to details that reconnaissance interpreters would notice. Real tank tracks were driven into the mud approaching the dummy positions. Camouflage netting was draped over the inflatables, but carelessly, allowing portions to remain visible. Laundry lines appeared near the false encampments. Soldiers were photographed moving around the dummy equipment during scheduled reconnaissance overflights. Every detail reinforced the illusion of a genuine armored formation preparing for combat. The landing craft presented a more complex challenge. The Thames estuary and the harbors of southeastern England needed to appear crowded with invasion barges. British shipyards constructed hundreds of dummy landing craft from timber frames covered with painted canvas. These craft, floating in the harbors and rivers of Kent, created the appearance of a massive amphibious force, concentrated exactly where the Germans expected it. Each dummy craft cost approximately 300 British pounds to construct, a fraction of the price of genuine landing vessels, and they only needed to survive long enough to be photographed by German reconnaissance aircraft. The visual deception formed only one layer of fortitude. The radio deception was equally elaborate and perhaps more convincing to German intelligence analysts. The Allies had broken the German Enigma codes in 1941, giving them access to German military communications throughout the war. This intelligence windfall, codenamed Ultra, revealed exactly what the Germans knew, what they believed, and critically, how they analyzed Allied radio traffic. German signals intelligence stations along the coast of occupied Europe constantly monitored Allied radio transmissions, using traffic analysis to map military formations and predict offensive operations. The deception planners exploited this German capability by feeding them carefully crafted misinformation through radio traffic. Colonel Clifton W. Ingalls, commanding the signals element of the 23rd Special Troops, organized a radio network that mimicked the communications patterns of a genuine Army group. Operators sent thousands of fake messages daily, following the precise protocols and encryption methods used by real military units. The traffic included mundane administrative communications, supply requisitions, personnel movements, and routine operational reports. The pattern of radio transmissions alone revealed the supposed location of FUSAG headquarters, which moved from one location to another as Patton's Phantom Command prepared for the invasion. German signals intelligence operators, plotting the source and volume of these transmissions, built an order of battle for FUSAG that existed only in the electromagnetic spectrum. Supporting the radio deception was a network of double agents controlled by British counterintelligence. The 20 Committee, named for the Roman numeral XX, which also suggests double cross, had captured and turned every German agent sent to Britain during the war. These agents, unaware that their counterparts had also been captured, continued reporting to their German handlers in Lisbon, Madrid, and Stockholm. The most valuable of these double agents was a Spanish national codenamed Garbo, whose real name was Juan Pujol Garcia. Garbo had created an entirely fictional network of 27 sub-agents, each supposedly reporting on different aspects of British military preparations. German intelligence considered Garbo their most reliable source in Britain and paid him substantial sums for his information. In reality, every word he transmitted came from British intelligence officers who carefully crafted his reports to reinforce the Fortitude deception. On May 29, 1944, Garbo sent a lengthy message to his German handlers describing troop concentrations in southeastern England. His report, transmitted in Morse code at precisely 11:30 p.m., identified specific units assigned to FUSAG and provided detailed information about their state of readiness. The Germans found this information so valuable that on June 5th, just hours before D-Day, they requested additional details about invasion preparations in the Pas-de-Calais region. Garbo's handlers in Britain, reading German responses through ultra-intercepts, knew their deception was working. The Germans believed in FUSAG, and more importantly, they believed Patton would lead the main invasion. Meanwhile, Patton himself played his role with characteristic flamboyance. He made highly public appearances throughout southeastern England, visiting the fictitious units under his command. On April 25, 1944, he attended a welcome club opening in Knutsford, a small town in Cheshire, where he made an ill-advised speech suggesting that Britain and America were destined to rule the post-war world. The resulting controversy made headlines on both sides of the Atlantic and nearly resulted in his relief from command for the second time in less than a year. But the publicity served the deception perfectly. German intelligence noted Patton's location, far from the intensive training exercises occurring in southern and southwestern England, where the real invasion forces prepared. The Abwehr analysts concluded that Patton's presence in the Dover region confirmed their assessment of Allied intentions. The deception planners enhanced Patton's visibility through controlled leaks to neutral diplomats and journalists. Social gatherings in London, carefully orchestrated by intelligence officers, ensured that Spanish and Swedish diplomats overheard conversations about FUSAG preparations. These diplomats, known to maintain contact with German intelligence, reported what they learned to their contacts in Madrid and Stockholm, information that flowed onward to Berlin. Every leak, every overheard conversation, every public appearance by Patton reinforced the central fiction. A massive Allied army group was preparing to invade Pas-de-Calais, and George S. Patton would lead the attack. As spring turned to early summer, German intelligence compiled an increasingly detailed picture of Allied invasion preparations. Their assessments, decrypted by Allied codebreakers, revealed the success of Fortitude. German intelligence estimated FUSAG's strength at approximately 50 divisions, more than double its actual non-existent size. They identified specific units, many of which were either fictional or were actually training for the Normandy invasion, but had been falsely associated with FUSAG through radio traffic and double agent reports. Most critically, German intelligence predicted the main invasion would strike at Pas-de-Calais no earlier than late June or early July, allowing several weeks after a diversionary attack elsewhere. The actual invasion force assembled far from the concentration of dummy equipment in Kent. 5 divisions, comprising 156,000 men, prepared to assault 5 beaches along the Normandy coast on June 6, 1944. The operation involved nearly 7,000 vessels and 11,000 aircraft. The men training for this assault operated under strict security protocols. Their camps were sealed in late May, preventing any communication with the outside world. They studied detailed terrain models of the French coastline and practiced amphibious assaults on beaches chosen for their similarity to Normandy. None of them knew that hundreds of miles to their east, an elaborate theater production was unfolding to ensure the Germans would be surprised by their arrival. At 6:30 a.m. on June 6th, the first waves of Allied troops stormed ashore on beaches codenamed Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. The German defenders, taken by surprise, fought desperately but could not prevent the Allies from establishing a foothold. Yet even as the battle raged in Normandy, the Fortitude deception continued. The goal now shifted from concealing the invasion location to preventing the Germans from reinforcing Normandy with their strategic reserves, particularly the powerful panzer divisions held back for the main invasion that German High Command still expected at Pas-de-Calais. At 9:47 p.m. on June 8th, just 62 hours after the Normandy landings, Garbo transmitted his most important message. In a communication lasting over 2 hours, he reported that his network of agents had confirmed the Normandy operation was merely a feint. The real invasion, he insisted, would strike at Pas-de-Calais within 2 weeks, led by Patton's still-fresh army group. The message reached German intelligence headquarters in Berlin at 4:14 a.m. on June 9th. The duty officer, recognizing its importance, immediately routed it to Foreign Armies West, the intelligence section responsible for analyzing Allied capabilities in Western Europe. The message arrived at a critical moment in German strategic deliberations. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, Commander-in-Chief West, was urging Hitler to commit the panzer reserves to Normandy to crush the Allied beachhead before it could expand. Hitler, still convinced that Normandy was a diversion, hesitated. Garbo's message, combined with continued radio traffic from FUSAG and reports from other German agents about continued preparations in southeastern England, confirmed Hitler's suspicions. He ordered the 15th Army, consisting of 19 divisions including several panzer units, to remain in the Pas-de-Calais region. These forces, which could have reached Normandy within 48 hours, stayed in their positions waiting for an invasion that would never come. The consequences of this decision proved catastrophic for German defensive efforts. The panzer divisions that did reach Normandy arrived piecemeal, thrown into battle as they appeared, rather than concentrated for a coordinated counteroffensive. The 12th SS Panzer Division Hitler Youth reached the battlefield on June 7th but fought in isolation. The Panzer-Lehr Division, delayed by Allied air attacks, didn't commit to action until June 9th. The 2nd Panzer Division arrived on June 13th, a full week after the invasion. Had these forces attacked together in the first 48 hours, as Rommel had planned, they might have driven the Allies back into the sea. Instead, they were defeated in detail, unable to generate the overwhelming force necessary to break the Allied lodgment. Throughout June and into July, FUSAG continued its phantom existence. Patton remained in England, making occasional public appearances and sending radio messages to units that existed only in German imagination. Allied intelligence monitored German dispositions through ultra-intercepts and noted with satisfaction that the 15th Army remained frozen in place, immobilized by fear of an invasion that existed only in Hitler's mind. Not until late July, 7 weeks after D-Day, did German intelligence finally conclude that FUSAG was a deception. By then, the Allies had landed more than 1 million men in Normandy, broken out of the beachhead, and begun the liberation of France. On July 28, 1944, Patton finally received his genuine combat command. He took control of the Third Army, which had been secretly assembled in Normandy, while he commanded his phantom force in England. The Third Army burst out of the Normandy bocage, the dense hedgerow country that had slowed the Allied advance, and raced across France in a campaign that vindicated German fears about Patton's abilities. In 32 days, Third Army advanced 400 miles, liberated vast stretches of French territory, and destroyed or scattered multiple German divisions. The Germans, discovering too late that they had been deceived, now faced the genuine Patton, leading a real army in devastating offensive operations. The success of Operation Fortitude was quantified in German casualties and strategic failures. The 15th Army, the largest German formation in Western Europe, played almost no role in the crucial first 2 months of the Normandy campaign. Its 19 divisions, totaling approximately 250,000 men, remained positioned to defend against an invasion that existed only in the minds of German intelligence officers. Had these forces reinforced Normandy in June, the battle might have produced a stalemate, or worse, a disaster for the Allies. Instead, they sat idle while their comrades in Normandy were ground down in a battle of attrition they could not win. After the war, captured German documents revealed the extent to which Fortitude had influenced German strategic thinking. Foreign Armies West, the intelligence organization responsible for analyzing Allied intentions, had produced situation reports throughout June and July 1944 that continued to warn of FUSAG's threat to Pas-de-Calais. Colonel Friedrich Adolf Krummacher, Hitler's intelligence briefer, testified during post-war interrogations that Hitler had specifically cited reports about Patton's army group as justification for keeping the 15th Army in reserve. Even Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel, chief of the German Armed Forces High Command, admitted that the German High Command had been completely fooled by the Allied deception. The men responsible for creating this elaborate deception received little public recognition during their lifetimes. Security classifications kept Operation Fortitude secret until 1976, more than 30 years after the war ended. Colonel John Bevan, the mastermind behind the operation, returned to his banking career and never wrote a memoir. The artists and stage designers of the 23rd Special Troops returned to civilian life, forbidden by security oaths from discussing their wartime service. Juan Pujol Garcia, the double agent Garbo, received medals from both Britain and Germany for his wartime service, a unique distinction that reflected his successful deception of German intelligence. He faded into obscurity, living quietly in Venezuela until his death in 1988. The dummy tanks and landing craft, once photographed so carefully by German reconnaissance, were destroyed or salvaged after their purpose was served. A few artifacts survived in military museums, strange rubber memorials to one of history's most successful deceptions. Photographs of the dummy equipment, declassified decades later, revealed the meticulous craftsmanship that went into creating convincing fakes. The painted canvas landing craft, examined closely, showed careful attention to weathering and wear patterns that would make them appear genuine to aerial observers. The inflatable tanks included dummy gun barrels constructed from drainage pipes and false track assemblies that created realistic shadows. Modern historians, examining the full scope of Operation Fortitude with access to documents from both Allied and German archives, have debated its ultimate significance. Some argue that German defensive failures in Normandy stemmed from multiple causes: Allied air superiority, Hitler's interference in military operations, and the fundamental strategic impossibility of defending a coastline stretching thousands of miles. They suggest the invasion would have succeeded regardless of Fortitude's deceptions. Others contend that Fortitude's contribution was decisive, that the margin between success and failure in amphibious operations is slim, and that having 19 additional German divisions counterattacking in Normandy during June could have produced catastrophe. The truth likely lies between these positions. Operation Overlord succeeded because of multiple factors working in concert: meticulous planning, tactical surprise, operational flexibility, and the courage of men who stormed defended beaches under withering fire. But Fortitude provided a crucial advantage by keeping powerful German reserves out of the battle during its most vulnerable phase. The deception bought time, the most precious commodity in military operations. It gave the Allies days to establish their beachhead, build up forces, and create supply networks. Those additional days, purchased not with lives, but with rubber tanks and radio transmissions, proved invaluable. The technical lessons of Fortitude influenced military deception practices for generations. The operation demonstrated that large-scale strategic deception could succeed against a sophisticated intelligence apparatus if every element worked in harmony. Visual deception alone would have failed. German intelligence could have discovered the fake equipment through human intelligence sources. Radio deception alone would have raised suspicions without visual confirmation. Double agents alone lacked the credibility that physical evidence provided. But all three elements working together, reinforcing each other, created a picture convincing enough to fool Hitler and his intelligence services at the moment when accuracy mattered most. Perhaps the deepest irony of Operation Fortitude was that it succeeded partly because it confirmed what German intelligence already believed. The Germans expected the invasion at Pas-de-Calais because geography and logic suggested that location. Allied deception planners didn't need to convince them of something new. They only needed to reinforce existing assumptions. The dummy equipment, the radio traffic, and Garbo's reports all told the Germans what they already thought they knew. This psychological dimension of the operation, playing to confirmation bias and existing analytical frameworks, proved as important as the physical deception. In the end, Operation Fortitude represented a peculiar form of warfare where victory came not from superior firepower or tactical brilliance, but from understanding how enemies think and what they expect to see. A handful of intelligence officers, artists, and con men created an entire army from rubber, canvas, and radio waves, commanded by a general whose greatest contribution to the invasion was to be somewhere he wasn't needed, threatening an attack that would never come. The Germans, expecting the Allies to do the logical thing, failed to consider that their enemy might choose deception over logic, misdirection over direct assault. That failure cost them France, accelerated the collapse of their Western defenses, and contributed to their ultimate defeat. The Ghost Army, existing only in enemy imagination, achieved what real armies sometimes could not. It paralyzed German strategic decision-making at the moment of maximum crisis. George S. Patton, remembered primarily for his aggressive combat leadership, won perhaps his greatest victory while commanding an army that existed only as carefully orchestrated theater, proving that in warfare, what the enemy believes can matter more than what actually exists.